Welcome to Constitutional Truth. I'm your host, Shar, and today we're going to talk about some Texas level bills that have been filed in the Texas legislature that will serve to nullify the H.R. 127 that I presented the other day. We're going to talk about two of them, although there are three that are out there, but two of them are Texas HB 635 and Texas HB 112. Texas HB 635 is an act relating to the enforcement of certain federal laws regulating firearms, firearm accessories, and firearm ammunition within the state of Texas. Being enacted by the legislature of the state of Texas, Section 1, Chapter 1 Penal Code is amended by adding Section 1.10 to read as follows. Section 110, Enforcement of certain federal laws regulating firearms, firearm accessories, and firearm ammunition. In this section, firearm has the meaning assigned by Section 4601 of this particular penal code. Firearm accessory means an item that is used in conjunction with or mounted on a firearm but is not essential to the basic function of a firearm. The term includes a detachable firearm magazine. An agency of this state or a political subdivision of this state and a law enforcement officer or other person employed by an agency of this state or a political subdivision of this state may not contract with or in any other manner provide assistance to a federal agency or official with respect to the enforcement of a federal statute, order, rule, or regulation purporting to regulate a firearm accessory, or firearm ammunition if the statute, order, rule, or regulation imposes a prohibition, restriction, or other regulation such as a capacity or size limitation or a registration requirement that does not exist under the laws of this state. Okay, so basically this is saying that nobody in the state of Texas that is employed by the state of Texas or any political subdivision such as a county, a city council, county commissioner, any law enforcement agency, so on and so forth, is allowed to enforce federal firearm laws that would be outside of what already exists in the state of Texas. Understand that we do have in Texas certain firearm laws existing right now, such as having to have a license to carry concealed or non-concealed in that manner. Okay, so as long as we're not, and of course you can't carry as a felon and things like that. So if the law doesn't, if there already isn't a restriction in the state of Texas, and there's going to be additional restrictions under federal law, which we know that there's a bajillion of them, HB 635 would preclude any kind of enforcement of said laws by anyone in the state. Subsection B, which we just read, does not apply to a contract or agreement to provide assistance in the enforcement of a federal statute, order, rule, or regulation in effect on August 31st, 2021 that pertains to border security. And I believe that this is a good thing, in my personal opinion. Others may disagree, but when we're dealing with border security, assuming that Texas does not tax it, okay, we have to work with the Customs and Border Patrol, DHS, and others. We know that sheriff's departments and local police departments, other agencies in the state of Texas do work in conjunction with federal agencies along the border, so they're going to have to work with them. And if someone should come across the border illegally and be in possession of a firearm, then yes, they're going to have to enforce those federal firearm laws in that aspect. So this makes it legal in that one specific case. Okay, so that's the way I'm reading it. Understand that when I discuss law, I am not an attorney. I do not pretend to be an attorney. I've never studied the legal arts. I'm reading this through the lens of someone who studies the Constitution and just happens to be able to understand legalese a little bit better than the average person. Not saying that I'm anybody special. I'm a nerd and I like to read it. Okay, Part D, political subdivision of this state may not receive state grant funds if the political subdivision adopts a rule, order, ordinance, or policy under which the political subdivision requires the enforcement of any federal statute, order, rule, or regulation described by subsection B, or by consistent actions requires the enforcement of any federal statute, order, rule, or regulation described by subsection B. State grant funds for the political subdivision shall be denied for the fiscal year following the year in which a final judicial determination in an action brought under this section is made that the political subdivision has intentionally required the enforcement of any federal statute, order, rule, or regulation described by subsection B. So instead of clawing back the money that may go on, okay, let's assume that it's, this is an act right now. So instead of taking 2021 funds away, they'll deny the funds in 2022 if it's determined that they enforce laws that they shouldn't enforce. Okay, instead of clawing them back and saying, hey, you owe us that money back, they'll just deny it for the following year. Okay, frankly, that just makes sense. It's easier that way. A heck of a lot less trouble going to, and it's a lot less expensive. They don't have to go to court, spend the money suing, demanding the money back, countersuits, and all that mess. Any citizen residing in the jurisdiction of a political subdivision of this state may file a complaint with the Attorney General if the citizen offers evidence to support an allegation that the political subdivision has adopted a rule, order, ordinance, or policy under which the political subdivision requires the enforcement of any federal statute, order, rule, or regulation described by subsection B, or an allegation that the political subdivision, by consistent actions, requires the enforcement of any federal statute, order, rule, or regulation described by subsection B. The citizen must include with the complaint the evidence the citizen has that supports the complaint. So this empowers the citizens of Texas to reach out to the Attorney General, especially those who may live in areas that are traditionally blue, say the larger cities. We know which ones in Texas they are. And we find that they're going to decide to be federal sanctuaries, okay? And say, well, screw you, Austin, or screw you, Capitol. We're not going to do that. We're not going to abide by this law. We believe that guns are icky and scary and dangerous, and we're going to follow the federal laws. You can, let's say some of the evidence might be the local chief of police going on local television and saying, we're not going to abide by this law, or the local sheriff saying, we don't care what Austin says, we're going to keep our citizens safe. That would be evidence, and you can take that recording and turn it into the Attorney General and say, my rights as a Texas resident are being infringed and this law is being ignored. If the Attorney General determines that a complaint filed under subsection E against a political subdivision of this state is valid, the Attorney General may file a petition for a writ of mandamus or apply for other appropriate equitable relief in a district court in Travis County or in a county in which the principal office of the political subdivision is located to compel the political subdivision to comply with subsection B. The Attorney General may recover reasonable expenses incurred in obtaining relief under this subsection, including court costs, reasonable attorney's fees, investigative costs, witness fees, and deposition costs. Okay, writ of mandamus, y'all look it up, but basically what I understand there is it's the court ordering the political subdivision to follow the law. An appeal of a suit brought under subsection F is governed by the procedures for accelerated appeals in civil cases under the Texas Rules of Appellate Procedure. The appellate court shall render its final order or judgment with the least possible delay. The Attorney General shall defend any agency of this state that the federal government attempts to sue for an action or omission consistent with the requirements of this section. Now, G, that's a bunch of legal stuff that, I mean, I understand what it is, but I don't have enough understanding to go into greater detail other than to say if the Attorney General sues a political subsection and they want to sue back then or appeal and whatnot, then it's just saying do it as quickly as possible. Section H here, the AG will defend any agency of this state that is sued by the federal government. Okay, which is his job or her job, depending upon who happens to be in power. And ladies and gentlemen, I do apologize. We have fur children in this home, and I know you heard on the last video that I did, you heard my dogs. Right now you're probably hearing my cat. I do apologize if it's distracting, but it's unfortunate when you happen to have fur children in the home. They don't pay attention to on-air signs. They don't really care. Okay, now Section 2 talks about when the act goes into effect. This act takes effect immediately if it receives a vote of 2/3 of all the members elected to each house, as provided by Section 39, Article 3, Texas Constitution. If this act does not receive the vote necessary for immediate effect, it will take effect September 1st, 2021. And then I put in here Section 39 of the Texas Constitution, which explains how that works. Okay. So that's section or HB 635. And that one actually, I may have missed a portion of it. I did, and I apologize. But there's links for these bills later on in here that you can locate, and they will be in the description. The HB 635 deals with past, current, and future federal bills. HB 112, an act relating to the enforcement of certain federal laws regulating firearms, firearm accessories, and firearm ammunition within the state of Texas, creating a criminal offense. Okay, it's similar. Okay, it mentions here that the legislature of Texas finds that the 10th Amendment applies. Okay, it reserves to the states and the people all powers not granted to the federal government elsewhere in the Constitution, as those powers were understood at the time Texas was admitted to statehood in 1845. The guarantee of those powers is a matter of contract between the state and people of Texas and the United States, dating from the time Texas became a state. And that's something that I just want to go ahead and throw in there. The Constitution that we have as a state, as all states, okay, not just the original 13 colonies. I mean, there's actually a Supreme Court opinion called the Equal Footing Doctrine, but all 50 states, it's a contract. And it's not a contract with the federal government. It's a contract among the states to create the federal government. But that's a discussion for another day, okay? The 9th Amendment to the United States Constitution guarantees to the people rights not enumerated in the Constitution. And if you read the 9th Amendment, you'll understand that. You'll see it. It says that, don't mistake that, these 8 rights listed above in the Bill of Rights are all that we have, okay? The 2nd Amendment of the United States Constitution guarantees the right of the people to keep and bear arms, as that right was understood at the time Texas became a state. The guarantee of that right is a matter of contract between the state and people of Texas and the United States, dating from the time Texas became a state. Okay? Section 23, Article 1, Texas Constitution secures to Texas citizens the right to keep and bear arms. That constitutional protection is unchanged from the date the Constitution was adopted in 1876. And here I included that section. It's our 2A, if you will, in Texas. And you'll notice that it's slightly different from the federal 2A. in that we will have the right to keep and bear arms in the lawful defense of himself or state, but that the legislature has the power by law to regulate the wearing of arms with a view to prevent crime, which is why the state legislature has the right to determine licensing requirements as far as handguns are concerned. And then it starts off here with Section 2. The Title 8 Penal Code is amended by adding Chapter 40 to read as follows. The short title is Chapter may be cited as the Texas Firearm Protection Act, and then it gives definitions the same as before. State and local government policy regarding enforcement of federal firearm laws. Okay, essentially the same as the other, except that it really drills down in some detail. Okay, the state of Texas, including an agency, department, commission, bureau, board, office, council, court, or other entity that is in any branch of state government and that is created by the Constitution or a statute of the state, including a university system or a system of higher education. The governing body of a municipality, county, or special district or authority. An officer, or employee, or other body that is part of municipality, county, or special district or authority, including a sheriff, municipal police department, municipal attorney, or county attorney, and a district attorney or criminal district attorney. An entity described by subsection A may not adopt a rule, order, ordinance, or policy under which the entity enforces or by consistent action allows the enforcement of a federal statute, order, rule, or regulation enacted on or after January 1st, 2021. So this one deals with just going forward, okay, and not previous ones. So I'd like to see both of these bills passed, to be honest with you, because the other one, it deals with previous and going forward. And the reason I want to see both of these bills passed is because this one drills down. In fact, I'd like to see the bills combined, okay? But they deal with separate parts of the penal code. 112 drills down with some more specific language. 635 deals with past and present and future. So you can see where it's important to go to the text ledge online, and you can use a keyword search and type in firearm, and it will pull up all the bills for this legislative session that deal with firearms, and you'll find the good ones, as I call them, the ones that are looking to loosen restrictions on firearms, and you can find the bad ones, as I call them, the ones that deal with restricting firearms, okay, and then the ones that are neither good nor bad, the ones that look to maybe strengthen or more clearly codify laws for spousal abuse or domestic violence and things like that. I leave that the interpretation as to whether that's good or bad up to the reader and up to their opinion on how they view those. Okay, so by all means, pause the video to read the rest of this. I don't think you need me to read this to you. Okay, but you can find these things. It operates similarly to Congress.gov, and you can pull it up as I think a Word document, a HTML document, and then of course a PDF. It also has the same state grant funding and denying it for the following year. Instead of clawing it back in the current year. It allows the same reporting, okay, to the AG by citizens, okay, with this one, I don't believe that the two people who filed these necessarily worked together, because filing numbers generally have to do with timing in the 112 would have been earlier in the year, whereas 635 would have been later in the year. I believe that's how it works. Okay, and again, with the Attorney General thing and how they have to do it, the writ of mandamus. Same thing with the appellate. Now here we get into the criminal offense thing. A person commits an offense if, in the person's official capacity as an officer of an entity described in subsection A, or as a person employed by or otherwise under the direction or control of the entity, or under color of law, the person knowingly enforces or attempts to enforce any federal statute, order, rule, or regulation described by subsection A. An offense under this subsection is a Class A misdemeanor. So now we know what type of offense. And then Section 3, it gives the same type of thing as we saw with the other one as to when it goes into effect. Now here are the links, okay, for HB 635 and HB 112. I will also provide them as, clickable links in the description. Again, the purpose of constitutional truth is to not just give you information, but to provide you or help you to understand and look at some viable and practical actions or solutions that you can take outside of the ballot box, because arguably 50% of the population of the United States does not believe that the 2020 election was a free and fair election. At least 50% of the population suspects some kind of chicanery, some kind of shenanigans occurred. So many people are concerned with future voting being of any effect. Okay, so not that voting was ever meant to be the end-all be-all of holding government accountable. The founders talked about this quite a bit, and there was a time when not every citizen in the US or even in a state was eligible to be a voter. There was a time when the federal government didn't determine who was eligible to be a voter. There was a time when it was up to the states to determine who was eligible to vote. And contrary to modern education, women and blacks had the vote well before those amendments were added. In many states, in order to vote, you had to be a property owner. And yet now we have many people who don't own property, are wholly dependent upon the state, and still vote. And it kind of makes sense that one would have to be a property owner and or a business owner in order to vote, because you've got skin in the game. But I digress. So, viable and practical actions to take. Obviously, insist that your Texas representative support these bills. Okay? Obviously, if your representative is a Democratic Socialist, they probably are going to laugh at you. But still, reach out to them anyway. And when you do, be polite and make your argument as clearly and concisely as possible. Share these bills with other 2A supporters in Texas. So many Americans, to include all of us in Texas, are stuck on the federal. We really, really are. It's one reason why the Cruz-Beto election was so close, and why during that 2018 election cycle, so many seats in Texas flipped from Republican to Democrat. Not that I am one party or the other, but we focus so much on federal that we don't even know who our local representatives are at the state and local level. Few of us know who our mayor are. Few of us know who our city council people are. Very few of us know who our county commissioners are, and they are the ones that determine how much we're going to be taxed on our property, how much we're going to be taxed on our, heck, we don't even know who the school board members are, and they're the ones that push those bond initiatives on us and cause us to pay so much for school taxes. And this last year should show us that we pay way too much in school taxes because our kids have been just suffering horrifically with really piss poor educational standards. I mean, these teachers really, I mean, not that anybody expected a pandemic, but this closed down school thing should have been planned for in the case of a tornado, a hurricane, an earthquake, any kind of major disaster. That should have been planned for, but it wasn't. And it shows. And our kids are suffering. And here it is a year later, and some kids are back at school, some kids aren't back at school. And the Chicago Teachers Union are arguing they don't want to go back to school, but they're still being paid because we're being forced to pay these taxes. So anyway, so share these bills with other 2A supporters in Texas because they may not be aware that these bills exist. I wasn't aware of how many pro 2A bills were there until I looked for them. Okay? Reach out to pro 2A groups, okay, and volunteer to help them with getting the word out on these bills. There are, and I'm not talking about the NRA. I'm not real happy with the NRA, and many folks aren't. But there are other pro-gun groups out there. There's OCT. There's Don't Comply. There's other groups out there, and see how you can work with them within Texas to get these bills out there, talked about, and shared. What kind of action they may or may not be taking. Just talk around and see what you can do to help it get out there. Reach out to the filers, the sponsors of these bills, and ask them, what do they have planned on getting these bills out there? What you can do to help them get these bills out there and supported. And of course, track the progress on TLO, which is Texas Legislation Online, I think is what it is, or Texas Legislature Online. But there's, Texas Capitol, capital.tex.gov, which is where we go. It's like the congress.gov, but it's the texas.gov. Search other gun-related bills there. Like I said, there are many of them there. And then if you wouldn't mind, please share this video. Okay, so this is basically what we've got for these two bills that like I said, there's one more that's out there, but it's pretty much the same as these two. I don't remember off the top of my head which one it is, but you'll find it when you go to TLO and research and reach out to these representatives. Send them a little message and say, thank you for filing these. I support you. This is wonderful. How can I help? Then, of course, if they don't happen to be your actual representatives, reach out to your Texas representative and say, so-and-so has put out this bill. This is the bill number. These are the bill numbers. I would like for you to sponsor or co-sponsor or what have you. And I definitely want you to vote yes on them. There's no reason not to. And so on and so forth. So if you appreciate the work that I'm doing, if you appreciate how things are going with this, I ask that you bear with me on doing the PowerPoint. Right now, I'm still learning how to just do videos. And yes, I am a bit camera shy, but if you appreciate the education and you like what I'm doing, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, comment, okay, because that helps as well. Subscribe to the channel, share the video, okay, and you can join me over at Locals as well. I'm Constitutional Truth over at locals.com. And until later, thank you so much. Be blessed and live free.